how do you think ASB or other universities are adopting to the change? Do the current curriculums actually make sense? Where do you see the change, and how revolutionary should we be? Do we also almost have to scrap out the books that we have and adopt at the speed of AI and train the next generation? That's one. And how is ASB also training this existing MBA students to adopt to these changes as well?
So, as I was saying in my panel, I think education, just like any other sector that is highly, highly regulated, suffers a little bit from this lack of capacity to innovate on the spot. And if you know a little bit about education, you will realize that the approval rate is usually very, very long. But in the case of ASB, what we realize is that while we might not be able to change curriculum right away for various reasons, we're going to send our students to work in action, in practice, with companies all over Southeast Asia and the world. We actually had projects in 18 countries so far. And by seeing the reality of today in action, and then coming back to school and then reflect on what I learned, what I saw, what I'm learning in class right now, I think it gives the students a huge competitive advantage. But to answer your question, should education be revolutionized? Absolutely, okay. Absolutely. And then your second question was about what do we teach to the students now? So I think that every great school, business school, university, kindergarten, primary school, should teach a very, very solid set of smart and sharp skills. At ASB, we don't use the word soft skills anymore because there's nothing soft about managing diversity, dealing with your board, negotiating, managing conflict, dealing with diversity. What's soft about it? There's nothing soft about that. So we prefer to call that smart skills, because if you don't have them, you're not that smart. And we also think that hard skills need an update in terms of semantics. Hard means something that it's sort of like hard to move, physically heavy, right? And I feel like a lot of these technical skills today, I don't know about you, but anything that I learned technical 3 years ago, it's obsolete today, right? So to start with the assumption that something that's hard, that it's static, it's wrong. So I think you need to realize that these skills are dynamic, so we call them sharp, because you constantly have to sharpen them. So I would say what we teach at ASB today, it's a very, very solid set of smart and sharp skills, but then we send the students in action right away, all over the world, Cambodia, Myanmar, Malaysia, United States, even Timor-Leste. We went to Timor-Leste. And our students get to activate the skills right away. And I think the moment of learning and the moment of reflection is much more powerful.
So when you said 18 countries, have you seen, of course, Malaysia, the Western world, we're always lucky to have the best of the education. And there's a whole bunch of countries that still haven't had good internet, good education, probably still teaching the older ways. What have you seen from these countries where they've also picked up and said, okay, if we teach in this way, we could actually compete with the world?
I think the Eureka moment comes maybe not looking at other schools, but looking at the reality of those countries. I'll give you an example from one of the projects that we had, specifically in Cambodia. It was a project with a multinational, headquartered in Europe, who launched a product in Thailand. And after a few years of success in Thailand, they launched the product in Cambodia.
Right.
What happened is the headquarters sort of assumed that Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar, all these countries are the same. It is very easy to sit in Germany, in Frankfurt, in your office and look at the world and be like, oh, they are from the same part of the world, they are the same. Obviously, the results show differently, right? So what we did, we sent our students on the ground to learn how these people live, to learn what they purchase, what's their consumption rate, what is it that they like to do, what is it that they are willing to pay for. And I think when you knock on the poorest people's door, you have a very major reality check. You can't really afford to be arrogant, which a lot of MBAs are accused of being, right? So there's a huge humility checkpoint. But also one thing that you learn is that these countries learn much faster, in the sense that they don't have to go through the 1G, 2G, 3G. They can jump to the 5G right away. So that in itself, the 5G is just an example, but that in itself shows you that the learning rate in these countries is much, much, much higher because they don't have to go through everything that we learn to be here. So I think in a couple of years, you're going to see that we compete very, very closely to these countries. And also another thing that we learn, and I'll wrap it up here, is that the internet consumption rate in these countries is tremendous.
Right.
Tremendous. And probably they are much more active users of the internet for things that we don't use. Like, for example, Myanmar's Facebook interactions go anywhere from friendship, relationship, which Facebook was based on, to commercial, political, educational. So they really, really embrace these platforms in ways that we have not, because they don't have the, if you want, traditional infrastructure that we do and we take for granted.
Right. I mean, I always use this term called human hacking at the moment, partly because all the GAFAM companies, which is Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, these are the companies which are already driving a lot of our attention into mindless consumption of data.
Yeah.
Right? How do you think the younger generation are going to pay more attention to education when they are consumed by data at such a speed where everything is in seconds?
I actually think that this generation, the one that we're talking about, the Zs and the sort of like the younger millennials, they learn much more because they're constantly investigating. I think obviously with every investigation you have to realize what's the right place to investigate, and maybe don't take all your information from Twitter and all your information from Snapchat or whatever. But I do think that I'm very hopeful that they make faster connections.
Okay.
That they have multiple perspectives. I think this is a generation that deals with diversity in a very natural way, unlike us, because their phone world, right? Their world is in their phone. It's much more diverse than our physical world. So I'm very hopeful. I think they learn more. And I have to say, as a professor, I am much more sitting on my tiptoes with this kind of students than with our generation.
Do you think the CXO level is actually prepared to handle AI and the changes from AI?
No, absolutely not. I was actually talking to one of our colleagues from Axiata, and he suggested that we have leadership data programs where it's great. We hire CIOs, CTOs, data scientists, data analysts, all these like super technical people, but then we put them to work for people like you and me who, well, you're more qualified than I am, but we don't know what this is all about. We just expect that the data will do the magic. I use this example of what if somebody were to hire me to run a football team now? Well, first I would have to know what is this game all about. I don't have to be a player, but I would have to know really, really, really intimately the rules of the game, right? So I feel like when we talk about everything that you mentioned, AI, data science, etc., our leadership capabilities are very, very weak. And I think before you hire a CTO or a CIO or whatever you want to hire in terms of technology, you need to take a major crash course in that. Again, you don't need to learn how to code, because I don't need to learn how to play football, but I need to understand my players in order to help them do their job, by the way, which I pay for, and I expect results.
What's one key takeaway that you would give the CXO level?
Learn. Go back to school and learn. And going back to school doesn't mean come back to Asia School of Business or go back to your schools, but sort of realize that what you know today is not enough.
Right.
That sort of like the world is advancing us so much faster than our own capabilities of learning, and realize that it's okay not to know. Right? Actually, one of the things that I say is that the most knowledgeable people are the ones who are very much aware that the more you learn, the less you know.
Correct.
Right? So I feel deeply ignorant because there's so much out there. So I would say you work in this field, you don't want to work in this field, guess what? This is like computers 20 years ago. You can't really say, oh, I don't want to deal with a computer. This is not my job.
Right.
It's here. It's staying. So go back to school and learn.
Thank you so much for this wonderful snippets.
My pleasure.
And I look forward to talking to you again.